what we want to do, if we can be helpful in helping you engage with the community, and that is finding volunteers or spreading the word about what you do, let us know. We have 2 colleges here, we have the schools here, we have North Shore Country Day, we've got the public schools, we've got such wonderful representation. The students are looking for things to do too. And this is something that we're pushing out now with a new membership for students called Next Gen Entrepreneurs. So we're pushing that out, and we'd love to be able to promote this. But I know there are also apps that are available to get volunteers. Let us know who that is, because we will be happy to incorporate that in what we have available for you. So know that that's the case. All right, without any further ado, what I would like to do is introduce our special guest today. And I'm just so delighted that we have someone like Don here. Don Cooke is Vice President of the Alford Group, which is a philanthropic consultancy that I have worked with in my work with my affiliation with the College of Lake County over these years. Don has served as Senior Vice President for Philanthropy of the Robert R. McCormick Foundation from 2005 to 2022. His responsibilities included providing strategy, oversight, and leadership to the Foundation's grant-making programs in democracy and civics, communities, education, violence and justice reform, veterans, and special initiatives. He subsequently led fundraising and marketing at the Philadelphia Orchestra and at Chicago's Field Museum in Chicago. He has raised $1 billion, including running 6 capital campaigns. He is an author and a frequent lecturer and has served on several nonprofit boards, including the USO Board of Governors and chairman of the Midwest region, Chicago Council on Global Affairs, chairman of Forefront and Illinois Joining Forces. He has been honored by Forefront and the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And in 2023, Don received the Commander's Award for Public Service from the United States Army for his work with military families and veterans' mental health. And here's a fun fact. Don lives in Lake Forest, and he is actually a former professional astronomer. So lest you think any of you say, well, you know, I changed gears and I went into something totally different. Well, I would say you did, Don. So at any rate, without any further ado, I would like to introduce our special guest. Please help me welcome Don Cooke.
Thank you, Joanna. And thank you all for being here. You know, it actually is an interesting pathway, because it was really very linear, even though it sounded like it's so weird, you know, museums, orchestra, philanthropy. But it was really a very direct route. I was an astronomer, and I got a job to run the big planetarium in Philadelphia, which is like the Adler, except it's part of a big museum, like Museum of Science and Industry. So there I got into that, and then very accidentally got into fundraising, which is probably what most of us have done when we get into fundraising. It's not what you intended to do when you were a kid. And then from that museum, moved to the orchestra to build a new concert hall. Then the Field Museum wanted me to come and work here. And then I met the McCormick Foundation people when I was getting money from them for the Field Museum, and they said, why don't you come over to the dark side and give the money away? And I said, I'll be right over. So there I was there for 17 years. And so I retired 2 years ago, and I'd known the Alford Group for a long time. And I don't know if you know the Alford Group at all, but I do have a little ad slide. But just celebrated the 45th anniversary. Jimmy Alford was really the dean of sort of philanthropy consulting, and got this great group together, and so over 3,000 clients over the years, higher education, high schools, museums, arts and culture across the board, environmental science and social sciences, and health. So I'm involved on some special projects. I'm not a full-time person, but came in to help on some special things. I got some of the most amazing, wonderful folks we're working with, and I find it really rewarding. I really wanted to keep doing something after all those years of thinking I was making a difference. So I really have enjoyed this, and it's been a great couple of years. So I want to talk a little bit about the state of philanthropy, and I don't know if you have seen the Giving Institute or the Giving USA report. Alford has been deeply involved with this as a sponsor for years, getting this done from the University of Indiana. And again, over $500 billion is donated in America. And this is a unique culture. I know we all get tax breaks when we donate, but that's really not the driver. The driver is that this culture has established itself and we believe in giving back. And it's a wonderful thing. I used to get calls when I was still in the museum business. I'd get calls from museums in London who wanted to know how to fundraise because we do it in America so well. So it's a huge number. And we dig in a little bit. It's a little bit up. This is for 2023 because that's the most recent we've got, of course. And it just came out a few months ago. It went up a bit from the year before. But with bad inflation that we had suffered for a couple of years, it has actually sort of dropped in real terms. But nevertheless, incredibly generous country and continues to be so. And by the way, we all hear about these mega grants, Mackenzie Scott and everything. It's a really small percentage of the total, surprisingly. And you think it might be huge, but it doesn't come out to that much at the end of the day. So as you all know and are paying attention, because this is our business, some of you are actually in the business to make this happen, disposable personal income increased, over almost 20% increase in the S&P between 22 and 23. Of course, in fundraising, we see this as an opportunity for appreciated securities, and inflation now has dropped down. So obviously, that's a much better shape in terms of people's assets. Where does it come from? This is kind of an interesting chart, and you can see that it comes mostly from individuals. And I think we all knew that, but I want to break it down a little bit more. Half of foundations is family foundations. And I really think of them like individuals because they have, it's family members, it's individuals making the decisions. The foundation was a structure that they set up to take advantage of taxes and certain things, but they're making decisions on things they like rather than a professional foundation that has complex guidelines and staff and all sorts of layers. I was a foundation person for 17 years, and I would be the first to tell you I'm not a fan of foundations. I hated them when I was raising money because it took forever to get answers. They had, and I ran into way too many foundation people who thought they knew the right answers and wouldn't let us say, here's what we think we need, right? But nevertheless, about half of that's family foundations, and I consider them to be individuals. And then the bequests, realized bequests, of course, come from individuals. So 85% of this chart comes from individual giving. Corporations, you hear a lot of talk, we got to get corporate support. Corporate support is fantastic, but it's not a huge percentage of the overall pie. Where does the money go? Well, the pie chart has been very interesting over the last couple of years. For the first time, the human service, 14% of human services in the bottom right, overtook education, completely driven by the pandemic. Everybody, a lot of people were so aware of the challenges the pandemic caused that those human services increased dramatically. Education's still about the same as it has been. People giving to foundations, that's creating their family foundations and community foundation work is part of it. Public benefit, health, big chunk. Arts and, I always was sad, arts and culture was never as big as I would hoped it would be when I worked for the orchestra and museums, but nevertheless, still strong support. So that's where it goes, and you can see that, you can see where your organizations and your favorite organizations fit in on the chart. The education is largely, obviously, higher education and alumni giving. And a complicated chart from 1983, looking up, you can see how it peaked there in sort of 2020. It's come back a little bit since then, and that really was a charitable response to COVID. I feel I can help. I got to help somehow. It's not exactly philanthropy as much as sort of charity-based work. So I tell you, I always remind people, the first three letters of fundraising is F-U-N. Now, most people disagree with that. I think fundraising is so much fun. I was doing some work with a school, the Evanston Township High School, and the chairman, they have a foundation to raise money, and the chairman went out, and she's an amazing, wonderful woman, a bit shy, and came back with a call and a tour of the school and stuff with $1 million gift. And the first thing she wrote to me was, "You're right, it is fun." And success is fun. I have to tell you, it's as we all know, you get turned down a lot. I found the most difficult thing as a foundation person was I had to say no 60% of the time probably. And we took stuff to the board. They approved everything we wanted approved over the years. There was over 10,000 grants that I was in charge of when I was there. But we probably turned down 20 or 30,000 requests that came in because you just can't do everything. So I found that to be the hard part. Although having been a fundraiser, my first rule when I went into the foundation in 2005 was no is the second best answer. If we can't do it, it doesn't look like we're going to do it, we're not going to drag people along for a 6-month ride until they figure out or get tired or bored or pass away. We're going to tell them as soon as we know we can't help you, so they can take their time and energy and look somewhere else. I want to talk about relationships for a second, and this is really an important part of engagement, and people do give to people. We hear that, even though charity gives to nonprofits and so on. But it really is relationships, and it's trust, and it's impact. And we gave a lot of grants. I oversaw a lot of grants that went to people, and the things didn't work. But that was okay, because we learned from that. They learned from it. How do we move forward? I never punished anybody for something that didn't work, what we thought was a good idea. But I'll tell you a quick 10-year, I'll make this very quick, because it was a 10-year arc of relationships. I worked at the Science Museum in Philadelphia called the Franklin Institute. And it was the only thing named after Franklin that he didn't invent, by the way. It was founded way after he had passed away. But it's a great science museum and hands-on experiments and airplanes and all sorts of crap. So I got a call on a Friday afternoon. I was head of marketing development and public relations. I got a call Friday afternoon from a woman named Mary Baffa. She said, "I'm Mrs. Annenberg's secretary." Now, Walter Annenberg was, a TV guide, and his father had owned newspapers and probably had a bit of a bad reputation. And Walter got very wealthy and spent his whole life making up for his father's bad reputation, I firmly believe. Mrs. Annenberg was a charming lady. They lived in Philadelphia and Palm Beach. No, in Palm Springs, sorry. And she said, Mrs. Annenberg's granddaughter is coming down this weekend, and they'd like to come and tour the museum. Would that be okay? So here's a billionaire and going to show up the next day. I said, absolutely. How old is the granddaughter? 7. Well, that was exactly the age at the time of my oldest daughter, Alexis. I said, great, I'll bring Alexis, we'll have a great time. Now I called my boss, who is a museum guru named Joel Bloom, and I said, you got to show up too, because I'm going to play with the kids, and you can talk to Mrs. Annenberg. So they showed up, it all went great. Now, here's the interesting thing. We had a great day. They left. I got to know the chauffeur. I got to know Mary Baffa, the secretary. Monday morning, I got a call. Is this Donald Cooke? I said, yes. This is Walter Annenberg. I said, great. He had a really deep voice, in case you didn't notice my theatrical business. And he said, what does it cost to be on top of that plaque? We had a big plaque. We had built a new building, and we had a big plaque on it. Well, I didn't lie. Damn it. I said $1 million. And he said, I'll call you back. He called me like 10 minutes later and said, I've ignored your institution too long. I'll give you $1 million. This is fantastic. It turns out that in the 60s, this was in 1991 or 2. In the 1960s, he was blackballed from membership at a snobby country club because he was Jewish. The person who blackballed him had been president of the Science Museum. So he gave money to everything in Philadelphia. He had never given money to us. So this was the beginning. So in subsequent years, I got to pay close attention to Mary, the secretary. it worked out. He loved we built an IMAX theater. He loved the IMAX thing. He always came to the opening. We always had a seat for the chauffeur and him and his wife, and it was great. He gave us another $1 million. We orchestrated that and got another $1 million. I jumped ship to the Philadelphia Orchestra, and I called them because we were building a new concert hall, and he gave us $10 million. All along, I was sending a Christmas gift to Mary, a mug. I mean, nothing, just a little reminder, right? Just want to be on top of the pile. Walter Annenberg passed away, and the last thing I did before moving to the Field Museum was I called Mary and said, Mary, can we come out and see Mrs. Annenberg in California? We really need help. She gave us $50 million for the endowment. So that's a 10-year arc of building a relationship and building trust and having them count on somebody. So this is why I say relationships matter, and why it's sort of one of the key things we want to be focused on. Now, I did learn, and I don't know if you guys agree with this, I did learn down the road, number 3, basically when you're going to ask somebody for money, they already have a track record of giving somewhere. It may not be to your thing, but basically we know who gives, and we can do that research, and we know who has means, and so on. And so, you know, when I finally learned that, now, I probably learned that 20 years into a fundraising career. My career was 25 years in fundraising. I finally learned toward the end, oh, I can ask these people for money because they're used to it. I'm not. Well, that really relieved a lot of pressure, which I wish I'd known before. But all you can do is tell somebody what you're passionate about, and really share that story and let them make the decision, right? They're going to make the decision. And we're going to get into this, but I believe this is really a team sport, and we need to have everybody help and participate. I'm really a believer in this thing called the cultural philanthropy. I think, and I've said this with clients and with friends and everywhere, and this probably comes out of the museum business. I insisted at the Field Museum that when we were renovating, we make excellent bathrooms. Now, the anthropologist wanted a beautiful exhibit on the Aztecs, and I said, okay, we can get to that too, but we have to clean up some of the physical things. How are the security guards reacting when people walk in the door? How do the ticket sellers react? They are all fundraisers. Who's answering phones? Who's returning phone calls? Any one of those could, because you don't know who's coming in. I mean, at the Philadelphia Orchestra, we had a lady who sat in the same seat for 70 years, and she gave us $5,000 a year until she died. And she left a lot of money in her. So who knew whether we were turning her off? I mean, she loved the music, obviously, but all of the frontline stuff and the visitor experience stuff is really, really important. So I believe in creating a culture of philanthropy where everybody realizes they have a role, even if they're not asking donors. You know, I have this one wonderful client where I was in the high school the other day. Everybody, even the students, said hi to me as I walked down the hall. I was just walking to get to, it was an endless building. I was getting my steps in for the day. 40 people must have said hi to me when I walked in. I think, wow, this is a really nice place. So I think of that all the time when I think about moving from a sort of a transactional culture to a relationship culture, and that's really what the left and the right are. When you text for $10 for a cause, it's because you want to feel good. I can help. Here's $10. Boom. That's transactional. That's not relationship building. That's not stewardship. So, I think all those things are super important. Now, you probably know why everybody gives, but there's a lot of reasons, and this is why I think research and talking and learning and listening is so critical, because you want to find out what the reason is. Is it because the right person asked them and they want to be part of that? Is it because they want to be part of a winner? Are they an alumnus? Do they volunteer? What's their role? What's their interest? And you try to find out. But really in research, we find the biggest thing is in the box, is what's the impact of their gift, large or small? How does it make a difference for them? And so I think, and I've noticed maybe the last 20 years, more and more people are thinking about impact. The whole Silicon Valley philanthropy stuff grew up, and what's the impact? It's almost venture capital, and what's the return on investment, and a lot of talk like that. I'm much more a person. I shouldn't tell you this, but much more a person who sort of feels things about what to give to. And as I said, we had to sort out a lot of choices. But facts and figures are fine. I love stories. I love hearing a story about a student or a kid who comes through the museum or whatever. So, but it takes all kinds, and you got to study everything. But how does it make a difference? And that's, I'm going to get to that. Thinking about what your story is makes a difference. The real reason people give, everybody, is because they're asked. Now, this is a trick question. It's a trick, obviously, because people are asked. Very rarely does somebody walk in and step up and say, hey, I don't know what to do with my money. Here's some money. So you have to ask, and I'm going to get to that very important point in a minute. The 4 key persuaders: reciprocity. I had a great experience. I learned something. I benefited. I want to pay it forward. I want to give it. I want to give it so the next group can do it. I'm a bit of a giver. I've developed a relationship, automatic, but you've done a great job stewarding me. I'm going to keep giving. Authority, that's the trust issue. This is really about a lot of trust. If I give money to the organization, are they going to do what they say? Are they going to make a difference? They tell me they're going to make a difference. What's the track record? And scarcity is a really interesting one. This is this is about uniqueness. Where else could I give it that's doing the same thing? Well, for all of your great organizations, almost nowhere else, right? And so why are you distinctive? What stands out about it? Is it the geography? Is it the topic? Is it the mission? But whatever it is, you want to create a little bit of scarcity because it makes it special and more compelling. People react well to that. And then obviously the bullseye is where we want to be with people. They have the capacity to give, they're interested, they have some kind of connection, but you also have access to them. I'm going to talk about that in a second as well. How do you get to those people? How do you open the door? How do you make those connections and get started? And I think that we sort of love this. This is consultant speak. I must tell you, as a fundraiser, I never would have thought of this, and as a donor, I never would have thought of this. But you start. It's a little bit of a ladder. You identify, who you want to talk to. You invite them to be part of the discussion. You tell them what you're doing. You gauge their interest. You find involvement. There's an interesting, the fundraising phrase: if you ask for money, you get advice. If you ask for advice, you get money. So how do you involve them? And then how do you get an investment from them? And so the 7 I's, that's consultant speak for what we think we probably do organically and think about. But then if you think about it, it comes back again. Somebody who's invested, you got to inform them of how that's gone, and you've got to circle that wagon. One of the interesting experiences I had, I learned this great lesson from this museum boss of mine, who said Philadelphia is sort of a tight downtown area, and I walked everywhere. The museum was right in the middle of town, and I walked to all the banks and everywhere I had to go to make calls. And he said, every time you walk through City Hall, pop in on a city councilman's office and just tell them what you're doing or leave something behind. Because they were never in their offices, but their staff was. So I started doing that. I'm thinking, oh, this is really ridiculous. But anyway, I sort of did it because I said, well, maybe there's something to this. So this is back in the 80s. So all the museums and the Girl Scouts, everybody was getting some pork barrel money from City Council. It's called Class 500 grants. And the museum, we were getting $300,000, which wasn't a lot, but it's real money. And so once a year, there would be Class 500 Day at City Council, where the council was there, and we'd all have to go and say, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're doing, here's what we're going to do with the money. So I go in, and the place is jammed with all the nonprofit people. Everybody's teed up to go at a certain time, telling the story. I finally go up to the table. Now, we've heard everything. We've heard about the senior center, and we've heard about the Girl Scout camp, and I go in talking about a huge, big museum down the street. Anyway, I'm sitting at the table, and the head of City Council said, Mr. Cooke, I want you to stop for a second. I said, oh my God, this is not good, and there's 400 people staring at me. And he said, now listen, everybody, you all come in here once a year and ask for money. Mr. Cooke stops by all the time and tells us what's going on with the students and everything else going to the Science Museum. Well, now everybody's looking at me, glaring, right? But this dosage issue is so interesting. How often is appropriate? Just staying in touch. And I must tell you, when I was at McCormick Foundation, a lot of people did that really well, and some people didn't do it well at all. Just get a call, hey, can we ask you for money? Well, what have you done the last 3 years? You know, so what is the dosage? I don't have an answer to that, but I really learned that interesting lesson just going into City Hall and dropping by council people's offices, and I guess it made a difference. But that's the informing, and it's a cycle. So that piece continues, and once they're identified and part of the team, part of your circle, then you just want to be sure you keep doing the last 4 over and over again. And philanthropic value proposition. Why now? What's the urgency? You know, and here's the question that I always sort of would think about. If I'm your ideal donor, why should I give to your organization rather than other organizations doing the same or similar or even different work? What's the appeal? Remember I talked about exclusivity and that scarcity issue. I am a random thinker, sadly, even though I was a physicist. I don't know how that worked. But I really have focused people on linear stories, telling it very clearly. And every proposal I wrote, I started out with what we wanted. I didn't put it on the 4th page at the bottom, please think about $100,000. I said, we're asking you for $100,000 to do the following, and then get into it, right? But here's the situation, here's why we need it, here's what we're going to do with it, and so on. A very linear approach, because I think that's how stories should be told. Best novels are probably that way. And then credibility, the trust factors, obviously important. So I think those things wrap up and can easily be done in a 1 page, in an attractive looking way that you can, that makes it look fun to read. And those are sort of, I think, the key things in the philanthropic value proposition. Now here's my favorite slide. And some of you who know me know this is my favorite slide. When I was at the Field Museum, we had 75 board members. 3 were good fundraisers. 20 I didn't want anywhere near donors at all, or some number. And my job was to figure out how every one of them can play a role. We were doing a capital campaign, can play a role in fundraising. And so I created a whole bunch of things to do. And I'm telling you, it all worked. The first thing you need is a connector. Who's opening the door? How are we getting in the door to see somebody? I mean, this is sales stuff too, you know, right? I mean, this is really big. How do I get in the door? The second is, who's the visionary? Who's telling the story of our dream, our direction, our mission, and so on? 3 is a storyteller. Who's the person to say, a student did the following, or some kids came in and here's what they learned? I mean, one of my favorite stories from my days at the big Science Museum, we had a walk-through heart. You know, it was a big room, giant, ugly heart, and you actually walk through. And I remember talking to a bunch of business people. We had a big room full of business people, and I was talking about the nuts and bolts and how we balance the budget and how you know, earned income is a piece and philanthropy is a piece. I got all through. I thought I'd done a great job. This guy put his head up at the back of the room. He said, "Do you still have the walk-through heart?" Because he'd come as a kid. And I realized that the museum was not about nuts and bolts and dollars. It was about dreams. And it was about turning kids on to science and stuff. And so what's the storyteller? What's the memory? What do you think of? You know, if you're an alumnus, what do you do? If you've been served by the hospital, what was the meaningful thing? And then last, and super important, is the closer. Somebody has to say, boom, we need money. And I'll tell you a couple of tricks about that, because that's a difficult thing. Not everybody can do it or should do it. But what I think, and I think fundraisers in the room, many of you have probably done all 4 of those things at the same time, without a team. You've been on your own. You had to do it all. I know how tough that is. I did it all. It's not ideal. Best thing would be have a board member, some other support people, president of the organization, be part of this. But I think these are the 4 key things that need to happen when you're asking for money. Now, not every meeting ends with a close. right? It takes a while. You have to know when to do that, but that's part of the strategy session. But keep those in mind because I have homework later. And the other thing about team solicitations is I think it relieves the fear and the pressure. You're with somebody else. Now, I'll tell you a team solicitation story. This pisses me off today. So when I was at the Field Museum, Bob Pritzker had been chairman of the board of the field in the 70s, 60s or 70s, late 60s, I can't remember. And I used to go see him, we'll talk about dosage, I used to go see him every 6 months. And he was an engineer, and we'd talk about copper plating, and we'd talk about all sorts of science stuff, nothing about the Field Museum, for half an hour. Then the last 5 minutes, I'd say, here's what we're doing at the museum. Great, I'd go. So now it was time to ask him for money. So I had two very prominent board members, both friends of his. One ran for governor of Illinois. So we had the right people lined up. So we go in, and there's some chit chat. I'm telling the story. My job was storyteller slash visionary a bit. Obviously, what are these guys supposed to do? Close. So Bob says, well, don't I still owe you some money from a previous pledge? I said, yes, sir. We expect the final payment in March. And then he said, so this is like January. And he said, and you want another nickel from me, right? So one of these very prominent, whom I will not name, one of these very prominent board members of the Field Museum said, yes, Bob, Don will tell you what we're looking for. So I kind of looked at him, and I said, Bob, we'd like you to consider $20 million. Let me think about it. Okay. We get on the elevator, and this guy says, that was the best fundraising meeting I've ever been in. I said, yeah, you son of a bitch. You didn't do what you're supposed to do. Well, they laughed, and we got off the elevator, and that was the end of it. But anyway, we had trained them. I said, here's what we're going to do. You know, we're really disciplined. Yeah, right. Okay. So anyway, as we all know, we have to be flexible and be able to step in at a moment's notice. But I'll never forget that. And I saw him, like 6 months ago, and I remind he still thinks it's hysterical. But here's the thing: when you ask, this is the most important thing. Then you got to shut up, right? Once you've asked, you're now negotiating. And in negotiations, the next person who speaks loses, right? So I back in the Science Museum days in Philadelphia, we went to see, the chairman and we had a great rapport, the two of us, and we just knew what to do. We didn't even plan our strategies, we just knew. So the two of us go to see the patriarch of the Campbell Soup family, a guy named Jack Dorrance. And I had calculated he was making $28,000 a day on his dividends or something, right? So, big time guy, Princeton graduate. He's 6'6", and Chuck and I are both 6'3". We're sitting there, but he's sitting behind his desk on a platform, and so we're looking up at this guy. I mean, this is a real power thing, right? So we're looking up at this guy, and some small talk. Chuck knows him. I tell the story, being the scientist, even though I was the chief fundraiser, I was really, the scientist too. I'm telling the story about, kids succeeding in the future if they come to our science museum, and I was, doing all that stuff. And we wanted him to name the new IMAX theater, which I had mentioned. So Chuck says, we'd like you to name the IMAX theater. And he, by the way, he was doodling the whole time. He never made eye contact. We didn't know what was going on. I mean, he was just like up there and looking down. He looked up at Chuck and he said, what will that cost me? Chuck said, 2. Now this is 1987 or something, $2 million, a lot of money. 2. Now, the tension in the room. What you want to do is, but if that's too much, we can no. I sat there looking at the two of them. It felt like it was a half an hour, right? And it was probably 10 seconds. And finally, Jack looked up and said, well, I've got some other things. Let me think about it. And so, all good. But that moment, put the number on the table and get out of the way, because it's up to them to decide it's too much, not up to you. I know of one instance in my entire career where somebody was angry they were asked for too much. So the lovely man in Philadelphia, who probably had, at the time, $45, $50 million in assets, and Princeton asked him for $20 million. And he was furious that they didn't know, they hadn't thought about it. He's a wildly generous guy, way beyond what he probably would have done with $50 million. Most people would do with $50 million. He was really angry. But that was the only time. Most time people say, well, I'm not in that league, or I can't do it right now, or no, I think you have me a little wrong. But most people are more flattered in a way than they are upset. So, but anyway, that is really a key. And that was a great experience for me because I was nervous. One of the things is elevator pitches and how you can help your folks, your board members, your staff and everybody do their elevator pitches. But really, why is really straightforward. Why you're involved, and that's either as a staff person or some of you are board members and stuff, why you're involved and what you care about, and why others should be too. Some of the best fundraising calls I've been in is when somebody has been a giver at any level. They don't have to be super high givers if they don't have it, but with meaningful gifts and a meaningful percentage of what they can do. When they say, join me, I'm doing this, join me because it's important. And so, we don't need to go into this very much, but these elevator pitches are really helpful, and I was not good at getting board members to do this well. I learned a lot since, but impact and urgency. Why now? Why this organization? And are really two of the key things you want to do. And is there a way we can tell you more? You want to come for a tour? Can you come in and see what we're doing? Because leave it open-ended. It's not like here's my pitch, I'm done. It's here's my pitch, and part of it is how can we engage you? Can you come in sometime soon? Oh, I don't know. I got a lot of this. Okay, we don't need to do this. You can tell. You all know this. You're all geniuses. So Rudyard Kipling, somewhat controversial figure, of course, because of who he was. But there's an interesting story that at the height of his writing, he was making 5 shillings per word. And some smart alecky Oxford students put 5 shillings in an envelope with a note that said, send us one of your best words. He took the money and he wrote back, thanks. And it's a great word. And somebody told me years ago, I don't know if this is true, that you can say thank you to people up to 7 times without having them wearing them out, right? But that's not so easy to do. It is a great word, but who can do it? Well, your connector could do it. The president of the organization can do it. Your chief medical person or curator at the Field Museum could do it. The person who actually asked. Now, that may be 3, maybe 4 different people, maybe 2 different people. How do you get to 7? I don't think I ever got over 5. I mean, I would sit there in my days at the Field Museum and say, okay, that's a great gift. Who else can say, who else do they know? But don't be afraid of saying thank you. Thank you for the visit. Thank you for your coming in for the tour. Thank you for your gift. It is a very good word. So let me just give you some thoughts for homework. When you're cooking or taking a bath or anything else you do, think about where you are from a comfort level standpoint and how you can supplement a team, which could be your staff people, board members, other professionals in the organization, when it comes to asking for money. What's the strongest way to do it? The strongest team to put together? Could be 2 people, could be more. How to do it. I like slightly overloading the person we're seeing. If it's a husband and wife, I like to go with 3 people. I don't like to go by myself if it's a husband. So think about that and how you can fit in and where you're comfortable. By the way, when you talk to boards and stuff, I'm a huge you don't want anybody to do it if they're not comfortable. You want them to be genuine and feel good about what they're doing. So that's part of the conversation to have with people. And we've done this with boards. Where do you feel you fit in? And how can you help? Because you have to help. If you're a board member, you have to be part of this, and you have to help with someone. Connector's often the easiest, and you can structure some things where it's easy for them to invite some people to a lunch or whatever, anything to get in the door. Overall, the culture of philanthropy in your organization. I urge everybody just to keep thinking about that notion, that everybody's a fundraiser, and people who aren't helping don't know they're not helping and don't think they're a fundraiser, but they can make a huge difference. And then what about an elevator pitch, and how would you tell? Some of the stories I heard today, real quick stories, were great. Right? I mean, that was 10 seconds of a 30-second elevator pitch. But it was great, and very structured and linear and organized. So that's all I have right now. Obviously, happy to, I don't know if you saw my email address there. Any other thoughts you guys are, this is my backyard here, and I love everything you guys are doing. Kate.
I will also say thank you, and I have to ask, if you did the $20 million gift, then your board member made you ask for it.
That's a brilliant question. Got back to the Field Museum that day, and I said, you know, how the family, now this is when the family was a bit different. It was not as scattered philanthropically, the Pritzker family, as it is now. It's very complex, a lot of individuals. Back then it was 4 key leaders of each of the family paths. So it was Bob, Tom, Penny, and Nick. And they would get together to decide the family philanthropy pretty much. It got broken up later because of the lawsuits and stuff. So I went back and said, you know, we have got, what we should do to get $20 million is we should name this new facility after Bob, because he's our former chairman. He wouldn't go for it, so we didn't ask him. Let's go see Tom, Penny, and Nick and tell them that's what we did with Bob, and we'd love to name this new facility after him. So we started on this little tour. We got to see Tom. Well, that's an interesting idea. Now, Tom loved the Field Museum because he loves Nepal and Asia, and we have great Asian collections. We go see Nick. Nick loves dinosaurs, so we have dinosaurs. This is great. We finally get to see Penny. She said, family already decided. I said, oh, okay, but we're going to have to let Bob tell you. I said, okay, so we got on. And my boss, John McCarter at the field, said, we got on the elevator. He said, what do you think? And that's what we got. We got $5 million. Yeah. So the other story on the Jack Dorrance one, the guy who I said 2. This is weird, but we said 2 and then shut up. That was on a Monday. On Friday, I opened an envelope addressed to me, no letter, a check for $500,000 from him. So I went into the chairman, I said, and he was a pro bono chairman, but he was there a lot. I said, hey, look at this. You know, I don't know if this is an installment or whatever. Okay, fine. So we didn't have any idea whether it was 1/4 of what we asked or whether it was it. Saturday, the next day, Jack Dorrance died of a heart attack in a restaurant. Monday, I cannot believe this. I come to the office. I said, did you hear about Jack Dorrance? Chuck said, yeah, this is terrible. Let's call Ed Foltz. Now, Ed was an old Philadelphian patrician lawyer who happened to be on our board, but Jack Dorrance's personal lawyer. I'm sitting in the office, and I hear half the conversation. Chuck gets on and says, so sorry about Jack, this is really terrible. Yeah, well, by the way, we got the first installment of 2, what do you mean? Well, we asked him for $2 million and he sent $500,000. No, we didn't get a letter. I mean, I'm telling you the one half of the half I heard, right? And at the end of the day, we didn't get any more because there was no commitment for anything. I mean, it was just $500,000. It was probably a go away gift, right? But I'll never believe he did that. But he was a guy who he was a marketing genius, and he never took no for an answer. He had run a big company called the Franklin Mint, which sells tchotchkes and calls them limited edition collectibles. I mean, I always teased him about that. You know, they did books and they did coins and they did all crap and stuff. Anyway, but he was a genius, and I tell you, he never took no for an answer. We would get together every morning, and he'd call to his secretary and say, hey, call Len Abramson, we got to go see Len. He can't see you for several months. Okay, in 3 months we'll call him back. It never took no for an answer. And eventually he wore some people down. And I mean, it was a really interesting lesson of persistence. I could never have done that without him doing it. I mean, he did it, I didn't do it. But I'm sort of like, okay, I'll just stay away from him. But he was a really interesting character. So, but I couldn't believe he called the lawyer and said we'd gotten an installment. It's still embarrassing that I was even in the room for that, but sort of tasteless, but whatever. You know, what if he said, okay? Okay, well, thank you very much.
All right, all I can say is Don makes it look so easy, doesn't he? All right, so we want to take all of this into account, and please know that Bruce is recording this for us, so we will make it available to you. Thank you all so very, very much. Thanks, of course, that's the best word. We look forward to being of assistance to you. Have a wonderful day.